Hello and welcome to today's webinar. It all starts here, effectively capturing paper and digital documents in your existing applications. I'm Teresa Resick, and I'm the Director of Online Events at AIIM, and AIIM is your host and producer of today's event. And with me today are Kevin Parker of Questix and Baris Isici of AccuSoft. AccuSoft is the underwriter of today's webinar, and we thank them for their support. And thank you for taking the time to join us today. As we get started, just want to offer a few pointers for viewing today's webinar. By joining us live, you can customize your own viewing experience, so feel free to open, close, or resize the different windows. And across the bottom of your screen is a list of all of the widgets that we do have available for you. Group chat is available to you, and open this by clicking in the icons that are along the bottom. And with group chat, you'll be able to text a message with each other, but also with a few of us here at AIIM. Do ask questions of the speakers throughout our time today using the Q&A feature, and we will hold these questions until the end, where we should have about 5 or 10 minutes to answer them. You can also use this feature to ask for technical assistance. You can download a PDF of this presentation at any time. Just look to the resources list, and that's to the right of the slide area. There's also a few other documents and links in there to help you learn more about today's topic. Just click in there at any time, and that resource will open in a new browser tab for you. Then you can save that and read it after the webinar. And at the conclusion of this webinar, a brief survey will open in your browser, but it's also in the widgets below the slide area. And I would greatly appreciate it if you would take a few moments to offer your feedback and also to suggest other topics for us to cover. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to AIIM.org's Resources Webinars page in just a few days. And now I'd like to introduce the speakers we have with us today. Kevin Parker founded Questix to help more organizations bring order to information chaos and to better leverage their valuable information. Kevin has won multiple industry awards and is active in a number of professional groups, and he's also president of AIIM's National Capital Chapter. He is a well-known speaker and thought leader in the areas of information governance, enterprise architecture, websites and applications, information management, information technology, and cybersecurity. And we also have with us Baris Isici, and he's a senior consultant of document and data services with AccuSoft. Baris is an accomplished executive with over 18 years of experience in creating successful partnerships across multiple business channels. His specialty involves a full suite of data streaming and imaging solutions that developers integrate into their existing applications to convert content into actionable data. So before I turn things over to Kevin, we're going to open things up with having a poll. And so I invite everybody to come up to your keyboards and answer this opening question for us. And the question we want to lead off with is, how important is document capture and processing for your company? Is it extremely important, very important, somewhat important, not so much, and not important at all? And this will just give us a little baseline before Kevin starts his talk. So just want to know with how you rate the importance of document capture and the processing of it in your company. So then just take a quick look at these results here, and I invite Kevin Parker to join in with this. And from my perspective, happily everyone finds that is some value of importance within their organization. But kind of surprised that about a quarter of our audience only rates it about like that 50-50 somewhat important. Kevin, what do you think about these results?
Well, I think that if you think it's important at all, you're in the right place with today's webinar. So glad to have you all here with us. Sometimes we do capture because it's told of us to do it, whether we think it's important or not. So perhaps that's what this group is. That would be interesting to find out more in the question time.
Okay. Well, Kevin, let's go ahead and have you begin your presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, Teresa, and thank you, AIIM, for having me. I really appreciate being able to share with our audience on this topic today. I really believe in AIIM training, and as you can see from all the letters down there, I think it's a very valuable program. So I'll give a free plug to that. If you need some training more than what we give in these webinars, then by all means go to the AIIM website and check it out. I cannot recommend it highly enough. So let's dive right in. There are a lot of different document types and sources. Traditionally, we think of documents as those paper things that sit in filing drawers inside filing folders. And there's still a lot of that. I remember years ago us talking about the paperless office and how we were going to get there by some year that still hasn't happened yet. Yet we do have a lot more born digital content, and that's great as organizations continue to transform, as governments continue to transform, and just as a society, we can do a lot more things digitally than we ever could before. But paper's still going to be a part of that for a while. And whether something's paper or digital from the beginning, you still have to capture it into your business systems in order to use it. And it has to be captured in a smart way in order to be leveraged so that stuff's just not locked into these documents. You either have, again, a physical file folder that's not very useful or a digital file folder that's just only slightly more useful. So I want to talk about that today. You got things from photos and videos, emails and attachments, PDFs or other types of documents that you scan, some that are born digitally, and just a plethora of Office document formats and just more all the time. And then we don't always think in these circles of information management as that structured data has got to be part of this, but it absolutely has to be. I worked with a government agency that adjudicates thousands of cases a year in their particular area, and a lot of it is, of course, evidence documents that get submitted, which all have to be captured, but there's also all the data and metadata that goes with it that is part of the adjudication of those cases. And that goes for all kinds of processes, the structured data and the what's often called unstructured data. Those things have to be leveraged together and managed together, governed together as records throughout a process. So we're going to jump into that in a little bit more detail. First, before we get into capture particularly, I want to deal with the topic of digital transformation. I hear this term all the time, and depending on the audience, or rather the source, people would mean totally different things by it. In information management circles, we often think of it as digitizing paper, which it definitely can be part of that. But really, digital transformation is about business transformation using digital tools. That is, leveraging modern technology to do your work better and to serve your customers better. And while it doesn't mean digitizing paper, at least that's not how CIOs who do digital transformation projects mean it. It certainly can and should include it if that can help improve your business. If it can transform, then this should be part of it. What we're talking about today with the whole capture thing. Digital transformation is a means to an end. It is about meeting business goals in smarter, better, faster ways. And it should always involve IT from the very beginning. It doesn't mean that IT drives what the business transformation should be, but technology is always going to be that enabler that has to be leveraged in smart ways. And so you should have your CIOs at the table, your other technology executives and leaders in order to help you develop the right kind of solution that will meet your needs for the budget. But always tie it back to the business. How are you helping the business? Now, there are some problems with paper documents and even scanned paper documents. Often, if it's just sitting in a folder, like on a desk or on a desktop, it is limited in terms of who can access it and how. Sharing can be difficult. Now, unless you make a bunch of copies of things, but then you've got the whole governance problem with what do I do with the copies, and security can be problematic, right? So I'm in the DC area, and so there are a ton of government employees and contractors and others in the area that ride the local DC Metro train into work. And you can't get on one of those cars in rush hour without seeing a bunch of people reading either paper or some type of digital document that you can just look right over their shoulder, and they shouldn't be doing that. I mean, we're trained all the time. Don't do that. You should be aware of your surroundings and who can read over your shoulder. But, so security can be problematic that way. If it's just papers in a box under a desk, that's also problematic because, anyone can access that has access to the physical place. Processes are often very slow when you have to actually push a paper from one place to another, especially if mail is involved. It can just be tremendously slow. And information is really locked away or lost inside these documents. And that, again, includes digitized documents. So unless they're captured in the system that can actually leverage them, it's just information sitting in a document that only the person who has access to it or knows about it can ever use it. Particularly if you don't actually do like optical character recognition or something else on the document and it's just an image. That's really not that useful for most purposes. So I want to give just a few really bad and good examples from my personal experience. So in recent years, I found myself between jobs at one point, and I elected to use the COBRA insurance, so to continue on with the coverage. But the process that the administrator of that particular health plan goes through in order to do that, well, it took me almost a month in order to get the actual insurance company to turn it back on because they couldn't accept a digital online payment. Their system was broken, and so I sent them a check. It took them, a couple of weeks to process that, and then another couple of weeks for them to send it to the huge insurance conglomerate to actually process it, and it had to go through, physical mail. That was really ridiculous and problematic for me as a customer. Also, broken IT requisition processes, if it's got to be paper or even digital. So there was another example, I can't name the organization, but the IT rec process was get a supervisor to approve a thing that you fill out this form. It's a PDF form, and so once they digitally sign it, which sounds like they're doing the things right, it converts the document, the digital document PDF to a PDF-A, which means it shouldn't be altered anymore. The problem is it requires another signature before it can actually be approved and processed. And every time it breaks, and for months I was trying to explain to this IT department, hey, you got to do this better. I was a consultant, I wasn't the CIO, or I would have fixed that from the beginning. But that's a broken process, even though it was digital. A really good example is I worked for a company that had a mobile app that allowed them to, whenever we had to pay for tickets or for travel or for even a restaurant, for business meals or any kind of supplies or whatever we needed to buy and be reimbursed, we just snap a picture with our mobile phone of the receipt, put the amount in, and it's already sent off to be approved before we ever leave the table or the counter or wherever we are that we have to do that. Super easy, never had a problem with getting expenses reimbursed that way. And also, this last example, online renewal of vehicle license plate tags or anything that you can do to avoid standing in line at the DMV is a win, if you ask me. And so I appreciate that some government agencies are starting to do better processes of capturing information, both digitally and physically. There are some common organization hangups when you talk about trying to improve how you capture documents. Why would we try to replace what we're doing now when we've already invested so much in line of business software? Well, I say that you don't usually have to if your IT solutions are fairly modern, because they interface nicely with the right APIs, with the right different software development kits. They can interface with other applications with a new, even if it's a physical scanner or scanning solution, and the capture software can really not make you have to pay a bunch for new software. And that's often a good part of a business case. If you can leverage things that they've already invested in, then you're more likely to get these types of projects approved. Another objection, maybe people already have the ability to scan documents on our departmental multifunction printers or whatever kind of devices. If if somebody, it isn't their job to scan for a living, like they're not processing documents on a regular basis, if they have to scan something, a normal part of their job, it's often going to be difficult because they're not used to it or there's not an established process. So this can be okay for one-off document capture, but it's not really great for defined business processes. You need something a little more robust. And some may say, and I've heard all of these, is why I list them here, what we do is working, why change? Well, is it really working? What do the staff think that are actually involved in capturing this information? And what do your business analysts and your enterprise architects say? Have you even asked them? This is a good time to go back and to actually do some investigative analysis. So here's how you do that. You do an end-to-end business analysis of the processes in question. This is not really a way or a chance, in especially large organizations, to just look at every single process. You're usually looking at a particular pain point within a process or a set of pain points. For instance, back to the insurance company example, reinstating people with COBRA coverage is a particularly painful process that I know they're getting a lot of complaints about because I was one of them. That would be a process to really do a complete business analysis of and see if there are any ways that they can improve it. So then you work with the business to prioritize the processes and the pain points that should be improved, and then your line of business leaders and your CIO shop ought to help you to design, to budget for, and to deliver these capture improvements. And that way you don't buy more than what you need. Manufacturers of equipment would love to sell you everything they have. That's great, but if you don't need it, you should only buy what you need. Same thing with software. Get smart software that does what you actually need, and that's why you should always have both the business and the technology executives and analysts involved with that. When I think about how to do this thing, anything really with technology, I always like to begin with the end in mind, and that involves your strategy, architecture, and your governance. So these are just some of the questions that you should ask. These are the kinds of questions I ask. So since you're here today, as a consultant, I'm giving you these types of questions that I would value, and you should definitely get the answers to. What is the end purpose of this information? Is this input for a process? Is it evidence for adjudication? Are these historical records that need to be preserved for some reason? And there are many other questions, but really first find the end purpose, and then where should it end up? Is it supposed to be in a business process management system or a customer relationship system? Maybe it's a payment processing system or a record center or wherever. Just make sure that that's known. Often I hear people say, well, of course we know it's for this system. Well, don't make any assumptions, because these projects involve a lot of people across the organization, and it's important to clearly define up front these, what we may see as basic answers, very explicitly stated, so there is no ambiguity. Another thing is, how should this information look when it arrives? Is it supposed to be structured data, like XML documents? A PDF? Is it images? A document set that goes together? Those are important questions. This will help you determine what the architecture should look like. How should it arrive? Should it be automatically routed or manually uploaded? Is there physical media involved? Some government agencies, even though they may manage their documents electronically, because of the way the systems work, you actually have to take physical digital media from one location to another. And so you've got chain of custody involved as well. Like, have you documented that, and are you able to prove it? Another thing is, what metadata does it need? This is an information architecture question. You need to be able to properly index and make things findable. So what do you need to get out of that? Out and process things automatically. If it's just an image on a page, it's not going to be able to be routed automatically, at least unless it all goes into one place. That's a different question. But then you think about how copies should be governed. This is a question that clients often look at me and are just baffled that I even ask it, but then they think, oh yeah, that is a problem. So for instance, once you capture a paper document, what happens to the paper copy? Or is the paper still the document, the record, if you're dealing with a records issue, and then the digital is the convenience copy? Like, those are questions you have to ask and answer. And then during transit, what happens to the different copies on different media? Like, if you're doing something and it involves taking like a physical hard drive from one place to another, or a thumb drive or whatever, what happens to that drive? Is there a process for wiping the data off of it once it's gotten to the place it should be? Especially those pesky MFPs that I mentioned, those have hard drives in them, and when you scan things, they go on those hard drives. And I rarely find out that they're encrypted. So these are important things to look at when you're talking about capture. I want to spend just a few minutes talking about how to avoid some capture fails. And these are good things to go back and review in the notes. I won't spend a ton of time on these points, but especially in regard to paper capture, these can be things that will help you get it right the first time. or at least get it right as close to right as you can the first time, and then iteratively improve so that you're doing things well. So you basically have three different categories that I recognize as capture fail opportunities. One is variations, two is poor quality, and then issues. So variations in forms and formats, in business processes, and often it's equipment and software, especially if you've got different departments with their own scanning solutions. Poor quality can be like the original documents. If you're scanning paper, and if they're of poor quality and they can't really be captured well, if you can't read them as physical documents, good luck, digitizing them and making them useful. So that's always an issue. Also, document preparation can be bad. It can be, things full of staples or folded and torn and that type of thing. Sometimes the scanning is of poor quality because somebody didn't set it up right, because that's not their job. They do other things, and this is just something they do. Some issues can be with the indexing, with storage and transfer, and then verification and quality control. So let's just jump through these very quickly. So with forms and formats, it's important to reduce the variations as much as possible. Like if you have 10 different forms that could be done in 2 or 3 different forms, maybe reduce those variations as much as you can. Or make the different forms have at least the same kinds of structure so certain things can be captured in the same way each time. And it's important to standardize that. For business processes, you've got to clearly define and have them mapped so that you can follow them and make sure that's the way it should be. And govern the changes in the processes. Some processes change all the time, and really that's bad for things as complicated as document capture. And equipment and software, it's really important to standardize on those, make sure that you're using the right tools that can all work together. So for quality, you want to contrast originals, make sure that you've got clear text and marks on the documents. The documents should be batched together. Prepare the documents. This is, again, this is about paper, but one of the biggest problems I see is people not knowing for scanning, like what's the DPI, like how much detail do we need? And some will think, well, I need like 1200 or 2400 DPI. Well, that's a huge file that you probably didn't need. Or they may scan things and it's like 150 or less. And so suddenly it's just not that clear. It's not really admissible as evidence, or it can't be OCR'd properly, that type of thing. So it's important to know what you're doing there. Make sure you're picking the right amount of color and create really good images. Then you can do all the other fun things like indexing. So with indexing, you can capture metadata from the context whenever possible. You can leverage tools like auto classification, we'll talk about in a bit, and things like double key metadata entry to ensure like you've got a couple of people or a couple of ways to add the metadata so that you can verify that type of thing. The experts in this, the vendors and the professional services consultants can help you with all of these things, which is important to just know about them. Storage and transfer, do you send it directly to the repository? That would be best. If you have exceptions, you send those to a queue, and you can work through the exceptions to make sure that you don't lose information. And avoid transferring physical media wherever possible. Verification quality control on paper, you can use things like imprinting or endorsing, do image quality text searches just to verify that things are actually OCR'd properly. Let's talk about those right tools for the job. Now, the first column here, scanning equipment, again, that's paper documents. If you're doing that, it's important to make sure that you get the best tool for the job. But beyond that, all the software can be individual components or it can be all together. It just really depends on your needs and the software vendors that you're working with. So the scanning software itself, do you use a subject matter expert of scanning or somebody in the line of business? And what's the user experience like for that? If it's very specialized software, it's going to have to be a SME in scanning in order to operate it. And then on all the software pieces here, I've got APIs and SDKs. That's the application programming interface and the software development. Those are super important with these tools to be able to leverage your current line of business applications, which is what this webinar is largely about. Make sure that they can do that. So with recognition software, you've got your OCR, but there are other types of things like ICR and OMR, so optical mark recognition, intelligent character recognition, and then MICR, which is the magnetic the things on the bottom of your check, basically, that are read by a certain type of reader in order to process the routing number and the account number. If you're not in banking and that's not a problem, no problem. You don't need to know that one. But for these others, they can be really important. And then go on to auto classification and workflow. I'll talk about these together. So zonal recognition, drag and drop indexing, these all can be super helpful in order to speed your processes up. So to make sure that things are improved, you do things like Plan, Do, Check, Act, or Lean Six Sigma, whatever type of process you use at your company, and make sure that you're actually not just setting it and forgetting it, you move on and make sure that it iteratively gets better. So why does captured documents or smarter capture of documents make collaboration better? You've got things that are in a single point of truth. They've got one repository or the right sub-repository or whatever application documents should be in. They should only live in that spot. That's helpful without duplication. Your line of business apps can be your viewers for the documents or some kind of specialized doc viewer that can present it to authorized people, not to anyone else. So they don't need to copy it and send it as an email. Sensitive data can be redacted, which is cool and important. And then things like the original file remaining unaltered and digital signatures being leveraged, that can all be done if you do smart capture. Whether you have 10 or 10,000 staff, it really is important that you capture documents digital in a way that improves efficiency, costs, insights, impact, and that sort of thing. Larger orgs really need to look at having their CIO shop build a platform for scanning and for capture rather than leaving this up to each individual department, because things get messy and you end up spending way too much money as a company when you do it that way. So the old way versus new way of working. You think about the big paper file or the digital file that you email to people. I got the sad face here because that's really a poor way of working. But today we ought to be able to access the right information on whatever device that we're happening to use at the time, whether it's mobile, laptop, some other way we get the information. But you can only do that if you capture things and route them properly the first time. So bottom line is transformation. You want to make sure that you're dealing with InfoGov and cybersecurity from start to finish. Documents can access what information, because different people ought to see either none of the information or part of it, but depending on their role and their security clearance. You want to streamline the process and really provide a much better employee and customer experience so that people aren't always in pain because of your processes. So that's it for my part of the presentation here. This is how to reach me if you would like to know more from me. And I will turn it to a question.
Thanks, Kevin. And we're going to step in here with another poll question here. And so I invite you all to come back up to your keyboards. And we're just going to ask the question here, and then I'm going to turn things over to Baris to begin putting some additional context to what Kevin has been sharing. So is document capture and processing solution a current or future project that you're looking to implement in your organization? Is this something you're currently working on? Is it something you're looking to do within the next 6 to 12 months? Is this something that you're looking to do within the next 1 to 2 years? So you're just starting your research now, or is this a much further down the line, more than 2 years from now type of project that you're looking to get into? So just looking to get a gauge of where you are in with considering the document capture and processing solution. So just going to give you a moment to jot your answer down here, and not going to look at the answers here, but I am going to invite Baris Isici to come online with us here and start putting all of this into context. Baris?
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you very much. Kevin, that was really great. You really validate what we do, and you shared your personal experience as well as your expertise, and you laid out the groundwork for effective digital transformation. In your presentation, you covered document capture strategy, architecture, and what an automated process should look like. You also covered smart governance. I'd like to focus on 3 of the concepts and explain how Accusoft helps companies streamline and scale digital transformation, starting with capture. You referenced the right tools. You mentioned SDKs. So we provide those SDKs to capture both physical and digital content, perform cleanup functions, and then automatically convert the file into a standard format that is efficient to present to the end user. You also stated how digital transformation process for larger groups should extend beyond just a few departments. We agree. Routing tools, workflow tools, that's an automated process, and we call that processing in a service, which simply means that developers use our toolkits and libraries to complete the capture, cleanup, and read process, and then pass the data to various departments. For example, we see it in underwriting for loan processing. We see it in financial services for opening new accounts. And a growth area for us is contract lifecycle management, where we're comparing different versions of a document but never compromising the original. You also mentioned, real briefly, but it was very important, a specialized viewer. To really complete the process, a specialized viewer can be used to stream the images that the end user will interact with. That includes viewing specific pieces of content or searching within multi-page documents. Within the viewer experience, the end user can perform annotations, redactions, watermarks, and editing without altering the original file. And I believe that leads to your good governance slide. So in closing, I wanted to share two quick use cases with you that encompassed our SDKs, working with our support and developer team. And what I wanted to share with you was a case where a national insurance technology firm had a challenge with capturing and identifying and then routing forms to the correct departments. Previously, this was a manual process. Working with AccuSoft, they were able to use our structured forms engine to build a solution that streamlined and scaled the verification process of a very specific type of form used in insurance. The second use case was a little bit more complicated. It involved a large bank that needed to capture and store consumer lending data. That information needed to be warehoused in their electronic content management system. The challenge was to find the most relevant reports without downloading multiple attachments and then walking away and taking them offline. And I believe that was a governance piece that you covered, Kevin. While working with AccuSoft, they were able to use our HTML viewer and conversion APIs to convert the document into a standard format and then use keyword search to find and view thumbnails while never leaving the viewing session. So as I get to my last slide, what we'd like to do is invite you to download our Digitizing Documents in Your Applications. This document covers, and it's a good guide to show you what to consider when processing paper documents. What kind of challenges in document capture and how to address them. It's also important to have a standard document file types and to make them searchable. We also cover and discuss meta tags, and they can help you with file organization. And then there's examples of real-life scenarios where our developers have worked with organizations to deliver digital transformation. With that, I want to thank you for attending, and I will turn it back over to Teresa.
Thank you, Barris. And I know we're going to take questions here, but I just wanted to jump back onto this slide that this digitizing documents in your applications, this guide, that is one of the links that we have in the resources. So if you just click on that right now, and that's, like I said, it'll open in a new browser tab, and you can download that right now. I've looked through this document, and it's a really cool resource. So I encourage you to check that out. And I do want to get to some of the questions that we've had that have come in. And I'm going to start with this first one here. And Barris, let me just direct this over to you. As someone's in the evaluation phase for improving their capture and processing processes in general, what kind of support does AccuSoft offer for testing solutions within the company's existing infrastructure?
Teresa, that's an excellent question. I'm glad you brought it up. So when a customer engages with AccuSoft, we make available to them free use of our code. So what we want to do is engage them to start and sponsor a proof of concept. But we also want those developers to be very successful and look good in the organization. So what we do is we provide developer support prior to the customer purchasing the product. So it's developer-to-developer support during the proof of concept. So we are there in the initial installation. We do a POC debrief in the middle where we look and help with the results. We like to see that they're accurate and they're having high confidence levels when using our products. And then once post-sale, they receive developer support from our organization, which is made up of developers and engineers. So it's a very high-touch model to download, evaluate, and interact with AccuSoft. So probably a long answer. I should have just said absolutely support POCs and the developers prior to purchasing our SDKs or our algorithms and API libraries.
I actually kind of like long answers because I find them really helpful, so thank you. And Kevin, I want to direct this next question over to you to start on this. One of your slides, you talked about the common organizational hang-ups, and someone was asking, like, how do you actually overcome those challenges? We've all heard those excuses, those obstacles. How do you deal with those objections, get team members to buy in, or even get the executives on board for changing the ways? Can you just offer some initial tips or guidance or ideas there?
Sure. The first thing I would say is tread carefully, because if the current solution or what's been in place in the past, maybe even the process itself, that's somebody's pet project, it is something that could be a bit dangerous at first, and I imagine that's where this question comes from. So know the people that are involved that have done it and are in charge of it today. Try to bridge an alliance with those folks and start to offer some ways it could be better. But I would definitely make a business case. Even if it's not a formal written business case, you want to look at ways you can improve and tie things to the business. You want to actually present a very logical, dispassionate plea for these things can be done this way without it making it personal with anyone. Because really it's about improving the business, not just negating what anybody has done in the past. And so for executives, it's how does this align or whatever the organization's mission is, like how do we do our jobs better? How do we lead better? How do we get information processed? Don't get in trouble because we're violating GDPR or some other big governance regulation that's imposed upon corporations. Like that's important. If you can tie it to those things, you're going to get a much better reaction and response from your executives and others that need to be signing off on the project.
Thank you. Thank you for some good tips there. Another question I want to start this with, Barris, and Kevin, feel free to join in. But someone says that they have a big archival project coming up in a large quantity. And someone's asking for ideas or just how do they prioritize with limited human resources. It's very common to find these projects laid on top of existing workloads. And especially when some of the projects are born digital, but the archive is paper. What kind of thoughts or suggestions do you have for helping something like this get off the ground quickly?
Sure, Kevin, do you want to tackle that one together? Because I have my thoughts on it. But it looks like that's a question for a consultant where I would be somewhat biased and say, well, what you should do is have our commercial code and build a solution. But, we hear that a lot when there's limits on human resources. So we have an ecosystem of partners that are very, very smart and capable of using our tools to build a solution. But where we really excel is if you have a small team and you can dedicate some time to build a proof of concept, we'll give you the developer support to get that project live quickly. And most of the time, our customers have an application but there is a choke point. And that's where our tools play nicely, as Kevin said, or integrate well and allow that scalability to drive that data and that paper and convert it to a standard format like a searchable PDF. So we can work with a third party to help you get there, or we can work directly with you.
Yeah, I would add to that it's important when you're doing a project of this type of magnitude where you've got all this information coming in but limited people in order to process it, that you do get the right technology tools. Now, some vendors will come in and say, well, our technology tools will take the human element out of it completely. Don't buy that usually. There's always got to be at least a subject matter expert like yourself that knows what needs to be captured, but then you get the tools leveraged up and you can actually like scale and do incredible amounts of information capture, routing to the right places, because you don't have to manually tag everything. That's where the technology really shines. Even artificial intelligence, as we get more into how AI and machine learning can help with these types of projects and processes, at least the initial thing and the initial part of that needs to be subject matter experts who help to program it, or in this case, I mean, we're getting to the point where it's not actually like software development, but it's like training it, writing some rules, getting it going, and then verifying quality. Those tools can then take that and just run laps around humans in terms of indexing and processing things. So you want to make the business case for, okay, if we can't add a bunch of people and we have this amount of time and this amount of information, like we're going to have these tools, like what Barris is talking about, in order to actually get it done and do it with a high degree of accuracy and quality.
Yeah, absolutely, Kevin. In those scenarios, we have what's called exception-based reporting, where the system recognizes the documents and the forms and they process it and recognize it and identify it in the service. However, if it's something unique that it's never seen before, it sends it off and routes it to a person. So you can have it both ways, but absolutely having the right recognition engine and commercial code to do that. I know that there's another question coming out whether our code is for enterprise, and absolutely it's enterprise code that's built to manage, consume, and convert very high volumes.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for that really helpful answer there. We're getting close to the end of our webinar time. We've been listening to Kevin Parker of Questix and Barris ECG of AccuSoft. And I do just want to touch on a couple other things real quickly here. As Kevin mentioned at the beginning, very kindly mentioned at the beginning, that AIIM offers a lot of live instructor-led training as well as online self-paced classes in a variety of topic areas. And we can even arrange for a trainer to come to your place of business to provide a custom perspective of our instructor-led programs. And there's also AIIM's Certified Information Professional designation, and we do offer review classes to prepare for this exam, but this certification is dedicated to enhancing and promoting the profession of information management. I'm proud to say that I am a CIP. I know Kevin is. And I love the continued learning that I do get from taking the variety of AIIM training classes as they come out. So I encourage you to check that out, found at aim.org/training. Also wanted to mention is AIIM conference is coming up. It's AIIM 19. It is in March. It is going to be in San Diego, but just want you to put this in the back of your mind right now, because we do want to see you there. And we do have early bird pricing that is available right now, and it's actually going to, the price will go up on October 1st. So if you want the best pricing for the conference, take advantage of this right now. That's at aimconference.com. Last year the AIM 2018 event sold out, and we don't want you to get shut out of this one. So encourage you to, especially if you have some training dollars left in this year's budget, get this, sign up for this now. But like I said, go to aimconference.com, and as the more keynotes and more speaker sessions and everything gets edited, I know our events team does a great job with keeping the website updated as time goes on. But the last few years' worth of events have been fantastic learning experiences. A lot of roundtable discussions, featured speakers, so just a variety of learning experiences. Encourage you to take advantage of that. And just want to remind everyone that we have recorded this webinar, and it will be available in the next day or two on AIIM.org's Resources Webinars page. We will send an email out to you so that you can catch the replay of this. I invite you to have your colleagues join and listen to this as well. Don't forget to download the resources. Would greatly value if you take a few moments to answer that survey, to offer your feedback. And that's in the widget area across the bottom. And I also very much want to thank our underwriter, AccuSoft. Without the support from our solution providers, AIM would not be able to bring you these free educational programs like our webinar series. So AccuSoft, thank you so much for your sponsorship. And as we bring this webinar to a close, I want to leave everyone with our speakers' closing thoughts or key takeaways. So I'm going to begin first with Kevin Parker of Questix, your closing thoughts today.
Thanks, Teresa. So in closing, I would just say that it's important to always be reviewing your processes to make sure that when you look and see ways for improvements to tackle pain points, that you tie it to actual business objectives. Then you're going to be speaking the business's language, and you're much more likely to get it done and actually provide value.
Thanks, Kevin. And Barris Usici of AccuSoft, your closing thoughts today.
Sure, I agree with Kevin, and I'll be a little bit more tactical because I spend my days working with developers and engineers. If you have one of these projects in mind, understand you don't have to do it alone. AccuSoft has 28 years of experience in imaging sciences. We've done pretty much every type of conversion, starting from digital photography to census to taxes to you name it. Every type of form you could imagine has processed through our engine. So you can leverage that expertise during your POC. You can talk to a developer that's already done it. You don't have to do these projects alone. So we're there to assist you.
Thank you, Barris. And thank you, everyone, for your time today. For AIM, this is Teresa Resick, and we'll see you with our next webinar. Have a good day.